Raren, tell me, have you ever seen a ritual monster before?
Can you give me the most popular one? I was thinking in my head, like, I was like, why am I even thinking? I don't know.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever seen a blue Yu-Gi-Oh card before?
Yes. I couldn't name any of them. I couldn't name any of them, but I definitely
But you have seen them. You have seen them. Have you actually read them?
Maybe back in like 2005, maybe 6.
Let me give you the quick rundown on ritual monsters. So ritual monsters are one of Yu-Gi-Oh's actually first summoning mechanics. Similar to fusion summoning with polymerization or any of the fusion type cards, you take the cards required to ritual summon the monster and you would play the ritual monster on the field. The difference is the fusion monster is in your extra deck. The ritual monster is actually in the main deck. So you actually do have to draw it in order to be able to ritual summon it. So what I wanted to test today is to show you some of Yu-Gi-Oh's best ritual monsters and have you evaluate them and determine if at any point any of these cards have ever been on the ban list. And I will let you know, this is probably the most underpowered summoning mechanic in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! So some of these cards, when you read them, might sound very pushed as we get to the later stages because they really wanted to get people to play some of these cards. Sound good?
Sounds good. Are you gonna do the same thing you did last time where like 90% of them were actually banned and like you're
okay, maybe I can't keep all of my secrets away. I can't give all my secrets away. What I will help you with though is I'm going to show you the ritual monster and then I'm also going to show you the accompanying ritual spell card to summon it. So that's a like specific polymerization card essentially to bring this card out. So why don't you give this first one a read here? You might have seen this one. This one's pretty iconic.
Okay, unironically, listen to this. I have a side tangent for you. I went to my brother's house and he pulled out this binder of super old hockey cards, and in this binder of hockey cards, and like, you know how a binder has kind of like that little pocket like under the cover, he had some Yu-Gi-Oh cards in here. This is one of them.
Is it okay? So you see this? Good. You should be able to you should be able to nail this one immediately.
Hold on. I didn't actually read it. I was like, oh, that's probably all this shit. Okay, Relinquished. You could ritual summon this card with Black Illusion Ritual. Once per turn, you could target one monster your opponent controls. Equip that target to this card, max 1. This card's attack and defense becomes equal to the equipped monster. If this card would be destroyed by battle, destroy that equipped monster instead. While equipped with that monster, any battle damage you take from battles involving this card inflicts equal effect damage to your opponent. Wait, what? While equipped that monster, any battle damage you take from battles involving this card's inflicts equal effect damage to your opponent. Okay, wait, for people who don't know what that means, not me, what does that mean?
So if you were to, let's say Relinquish does, it would have to have something equipped, but let's say for hypothetical sake, it has a 0 attack monster equipped to it. If you were to attack Relinquished, I would take 1900 points, whatever the attack stat of the monsters, let's say it's 1900, I would take 1900 damage, but you would also take 1900 damage.
Oh, okay.
So the damage is reflected in a sense. And I'll quickly show you the ritual card, just so you can get a sense of what you're working with here. This is probably the most basic card I'm going to show you today.
I feel like this card, just without even the ritual, is pretty good. But let me see what this is. This card is used to ritual summon Relinquish. You must also tribute a monster from hand or field whose level is 1 or more.
So how this works for people who are unfamiliar with ritual monsters, you would have the Black Illusion Ritual and the Relinquished in your hand. You would activate Black Illusion Ritual and then sacrifice from either your hand or field a monster that has level 1 or more, send that to the graveyard, and then you get to special summon Relinquish to the field.
So let me just understand the effect here. I get to take one of my opponent's monsters and it's now attached to Relinquished on my side of the board?
Correct. It becomes an equip spell. So it would go into the back row, and it's essentially part of the Relinquished.
Like, I can't use the effect of that monster that I steal, I'm guessing, right?
No, you're basically just using it for the stats as well as the protection effect that Relinquished has. But if you take like a 4,000 attack point monster, hypothetically, Relinquished is 4,000 attack.
You said these are underpowered? But this one seems really good.
Relative to every other summoning mechanic in Yu-Gi-Oh!, this is the most underpowered type of card.
Fair enough. Yeah, I was gonna say when I was playing Master Duel, I don't think I saw any of these, which probably speaks to that. But I mean, during the era that this was probably released, like this seems like a very good card.
I will give you a hint. This was one of the first cards printed in the game. This is actually one of the boss monsters used by the main villain in the first season.
Oh, it has to be goated then. What do you mean? Like, that's crazy. No, but like, speaking from just a card game standpoint, like, you're not only summoning a pretty good monster that has an effect that just can't die if you have an equipped monster, but you're stealing one of your opponent's monsters.
Does Hearthstone have anything like this?
stealing your opponent's monsters? Yes, they do actually. Yes, they do. And most of the time, those effects are actually pretty decent, which makes me believe this is extremely good. Like it's more like there's a card actually in current Hearthstone called I don't know if I've shown you him. Oh, you would have seen him. Yeah, the Titan for Yogg, because one of his abilities is just steal a minion, and that's neutral in every class uses that. Like obviously it's not the exact same thing, but that card is used in virtually every single deck, except for unless you're playing like a super low curve. And it turns out just if your opponent spends a lot of mana and then you take that minion for virtually free as well as summoning Yogg, and they have to answer both now, it's just very, very good. Swaps tempo really fast. And I'm also guessing the turn that Relinquished is played, as long as I'm going second. Well, it doesn't make sense playing it like turn 1, I guess. But if I go second, it can attack immediately with the stats that it's been given from the equip monster.
Does it say it can't?
Okay, so it can. Okay, I think this card's very good. You're asking me if this was banned, by the way? Or
correct. Yes.
I think it's very good. Banned? Oh my.
If it was at any point banned, so not by today's standards. So at any point. So remember, this is one of the first cards ever printed.
These cards seem so good. It's also just really hard to deal with too. Oh my god. Sure, fuck it. It was banned. It was banned. It seems very good. It seems extremely
Final
good.
answer. Final answer. So Relinquished, for being one of the first ritual monsters, there are other ones that predate Relinquished, but they were basically just vanilla ritual monsters, which means that they didn't have effects. They were just kind of big stats, which those cards basically never saw play. Some of them are actually quite memey, all things considered. There's one called Hungry Burger, as a matter of fact. So that can tell you the...
That rings a bell.
Yeah, it's very iconic for old Yu-Gi-Oh players. It's just a burger with teeth. It's very stupid. So Relinquished was actually I actually want to say it was the first ritual monster that had an effect. And for context, old ritual monsters were like really high level. They were like level 6, 7, 8. Relinquished being a 1-star monster was actually pretty important, because typically you need to use the ritual spell and then other monsters in order to ritual summon. So the fact that Relinquished was level 1 meant that you could basically tribute any one individual monster just to get Relinquished out, whereas with other ritual monsters, you might have to tribute 2, sometimes 3, depending on the way that the levels aligned. And so that was a pretty convincing argument also for the effect that this card offers. Relinquish effect to suck up an opponent's monster is actually just a very unique form of removal as well. It does target, and later on cards got targeting protection, but there was never really this like absorption type effect where it becomes like equipped to the Relinquish. So it actually bypasses these abilities where things have protection from destruction, for instance. And the Relinquish effect to reflect damage as well, it actually was part of like burn strategies. There was actually like Relinquished Burn was like unironically a fun like little deck people played, because if you equipped a monster to Relinquished, you could crash Relinquished into another opposing monster to make sure they took damage, and then that monster might get destroyed, or I'm sorry, the Relinquished wouldn't get destroyed, because then you would just make the monster equipped to it fall off. Very just like really neat card, and especially like I said, it was like one of the ace monsters of the antagonists in season 1, but it was never banned. It just wasn't good enough. There was just the investment, and this is the biggest issue you're going to see throughout this video. When it comes to ritual monsters, the investment to get ritual monsters out is really a tough sell. Even though there are cards that can search ritual monsters and ritual spell cards to add to the consistency and the frequency you see them, giving up so many cards, the value has to really be there as a huge payoff. And so keep that in mind as we move forward throughout this video. Very cool card, though. Very iconic.
This doesn't have enough value. That like I understand what you're saying, but in older Yu-Gi-Oh, like you have to tell me, was this good? Like this was probably great, right?
Even by older Yu-Gi-Oh, it wasn't great. And the biggest reason I want to say is because when it's equipped, it says if it would be destroyed by battle, you can destroy the equipped monster instead. If that just gave it blanket protection from any removal, that would be infinitely better, because there are so many cards in older Yu-Gi-Oh that are just 1-for-1 spot removal, like destroy a monster on the field with the lowest attack, or just destroy an attacking monster. And so you committed 2 to 3 cards into this Relinquished for it to die to a single card. So from like a card economy standpoint, it just wasn't really there. I'm not going to say it saw no play, but it wasn't like any sort of like tiered strategy. This was like rogue at best. Every now and then, especially as Yu-Gi-Oh! Aged, people kind of went back to Relinquish to kind of do like fun stuff with it, just because it's a fun card. It's an interesting card to mess around with. And its upgraded version, the Thousand Eyes Restrict, actually did see meta play, but it was a fusion monster, requiring Relinquish as a material. So there's a whole host of reasons why that was a lot better than this. But yeah, Relinquished was very iconic, very cool card, but just wasn't good enough, unfortunately. It sucks.
Interesting. Okay. What I learned from early Yu-Gi-Oh right there is that removal was better than most monsters.
Speaking of removal, let's see what you think about this card.
Demise, King of Armageddon. That's a big boy right there. You can ritual summon this card with End of the World. You can pay 2,000 life points to destroy all other cards on the field.
I'm not going to show you End of the World, although that is the card that was typically used to summon Demise. I'm going to show you a different card.
Advanced Ritual Art. This card can be used to ritual summon any one ritual monster. You must also send normal monsters from your deck to the graveyard whose total levels equal to the level of that ritual monster. Wait, so you could also use this for Relinquished if you really wanted to?
Yes, you could. So as long as the ritual monster doesn't say you can only summon this card with whatever specific ritual spell, which you might see coming up later, you are allowed to use other types of ritual-based support, such as Advanced Ritual Art. And this is, as you're going to see throughout this video, they were trying to incentivize people to want to play ritual archetypes more. So Advanced Ritual Art sort of allowed you to bypass one of the biggest restrictions, which is needing the extra materials either on the hand or field, because now you can send them directly from the deck.
Yeah, this actually seems a lot better. Just in general, this card I was imagining, like, can you tell me, like, in timeline, like, how later on this was added compared to Relinquished?
This was several years later. So Relinquished was released like 2002, 2003. Demise and ARA, we call it. Advanced Ritual Art was released. These were released in 2006, 2007-ish. So a few years later.
And this card didn't make Relinquished a better card. I'm just baffled that this card is not playable.
In future Relinquished-based decks, they did play Advanced Ritual Art, but like I said, they were still never like the best thing you could be doing. So yes, older ritual cards did take advantage of new ritual support.
Okay, so if I could use Advanced Ritual Art, it's still 2 cards, and I'm guessing I have Demise in my hand, and then I have this. So you play Advanced Ritual Art, you play Demise, you sacrifice the monsters from your deck to the graveyard. I mean, we've gone through that a ton. That seems like it's completely good.
They are normal monsters, though. Keep that in mind.
What do you mean by normal monsters?
Advanced Ritual Art only sends normal monsters to the graveyard, so you aren't sending effect monsters with this card.
Normal monsters, as in like just like stats.
Non-effect monsters.
Okay.
Non-effect monsters.
Okay, so what you're basically saying is like they're just fodder to summon this card.
Precisely. Because aside from they could be stats, like they could still be monsters you might want to play, but they're not going to be triggering any direct effects off of sending monsters off of Advanced Ritual Art, because they aren't. You're milling 2 cards to the graveyard essentially, but those cards aren't going to have any value by themselves just because they are normal monsters. They don't have effects.
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't actually. You're almost saying it as like it's like a negative, but it doesn't really feel like a negative, right? Like you'd be.
I'm saying like a negative, as in like you're not getting extra value. Like
sure,
its sole purpose is to just summon the ritual monster, which is why they did it this way.
Yeah, I could see this being better. I also like the fact that this like clears the board. That's really interesting. Now, does that mean your opponent can interact with this? Like, is it a quick effect? I don't know if it's.
It's not a quick effect. It is an ignition effect. However, you might notice there's no once per turn clause on this card.
What is that? What? Why would I want to do it twice?
Well, maybe there are cards that say, you know, they can't be destroyed once or something like that, right? Or maybe there are cards that come back to the field.
Oh, sure. Okay, I was like, wait, what do you mean? I was so confused when he said that. Okay, 2,000 life points. If you do it twice, that's half your life, but you have this huge ass monster on the field, and then your opponent has nothing. This could win the game on the spot if you have the life points available to you. It's actually really nice ritual art. Like, I feel like that if you showed me the other one, I'm not sure if I would have said that this is good, but it's a good like catch-up mechanic.
I will say, for a bit of context, every ritual spell that like is listed on the ritual monster basically works like Black Illusion Ritual. It's just you either send the materials from hand or field. So like its basic ritual spell is not very good, which is why it took Advanced Ritual Art for this card to be playable in some capacity.
Oh my god! This is so. I hate that we're going back in time because you showed me so much like crazy stuff already. So it's is this really that good? I mean, I can see it being good though. Paying 2,000 life points is like pretty decent for an effect like this. Every other card, and if you're doing this, you're probably okay with losing all your cards where your opponent may want it, and you can do it multiple times. So just so I'm clear, like if you pay the 2,000 life points, you do this effect, your opponent can respond to this.
They can respond to this, yes. I will say though, in older Yu-Gi-Oh, there was no such thing as a hand trap yet.
Oh. So that adds another layer to me, because that means, oh, this card's really good, but also am I getting baited?
I don't know.
Is 2,000 life points really worth it? I feel like there's better cards to just destroy your opponents out of the board. I feel like you've shown me better cards, but they might have been banned at this point. I don't know. I think this card has potential. I think it's good. I don't think it's banned. I think like the board clear effect is fine, especially if your opponent can interact with it. And there's probably better cards that allow you to do this similar type of effect.
Final answer.
Final answer.
So Demise is awesome. Demise is part of a deck called Demise OTK. So how it worked was I sort of baited you a little bit in terms of the advanced ritual art. I said how the monsters you send off the advanced ritual art intrinsically don't do anything when they're sent to the graveyard. But in tandem with other cards, there are some ways to abuse this. So how the Demise OTK worked is that with Demise, you were able to, by ritual summoning it, you would send 2 insect monsters to the graveyard that were level 4. So that would equal level 8, so you'd be able to summon Demise to the field. There is another card called Doomdozer. Doomdozer is a 2,800 attack monster. It's a giant centipede. And you special summon it by banishing 2 insect monsters from your graveyard. So the combo is you would ARA for Demise, send 2 insects, banish the 2 insects for Doomdozer, and because you paid 2,000 life points for Demise, there's another card called Megamorph, which doubles the attack of a monster if your life points are lower than your opponent. So you'd equip it with Megamorph, and that's 8,000 damage. And you would just kill your opponent, and it was great. It was fun. It was awesome. And it wasn't good enough. This card was never banned. Pieces of the combo were limited. This was actually probably a like tier 1.5-ish strategy, I want to say. It was kind of gimmicky, but it was sort of all in. But the game was relatively slow enough that this sort of OTK deck was something that was able to compete at the higher levels with like just other good stuff type decks. And so I believe they eventually limited advanced ritual art. I think Demise may have gotten either limited or semi-limited at some point. They definitely hit the consistency of the deck, and after that, the deck was basically never playable again. But it's a fun part of Yu-Gi-Oh's history where it's like, this is the first playable ritual monster that actually was like really, really good, but it was never banned. It was never banned.
So, but just so I'm clear, based on the combo you described, was that the only deck that this card was played in?
Yes, that was the only way this deck was played.
Was this card good because of its effects, or was it good because it allowed that combo to be available in the game?
It was both, because paying the 2,000 life points to wipe your opponent's board meant you got rid of all of their ways to interact with you, any sort of trap. Because remember, there's no hand traps, right? So all of the ways to interact are in the back row in the form of trap cards. So Demise paved the way for the rest of your combo to resolve. Not to mention, in order to use Megamorph to buff up Doomdozer to be strong enough, you needed to have lower life points than your opponent. So Demise paying 2,000 life points got you low enough so that you could be under your opponent's life points, and then you could actually pull this combo off in the first place. And with there were plenty of cards to search Demise and Advanced Ritual Art. So, like, this combo was actually, by old Yu-Gi-Oh standards, like, pretty consistent. It was, like I said, it was a tier 1.5-ish deck at best. But, like, there were other decks that were able to compete, but this was a deck that people did fear back in the day because Yu-Gi-Oh was slow enough that this was able to succeed. And it's cool. It's just, like, a cool card, too. It's just, like, it's awesome.
Okay. I can't wait to see the rest of these. Like, hold on. Like...
Oh, you're going to like what I'm about to show you next.
Good. Okay.
You're going to like this one next for sure.
So now I'm guessing now I always have to consider that like ritual art is available. Herald, what the fuck is that thing? Herald of Perfection?
It's a Herald of Perfection.
That guy, whoever designed this card might need some eyes replaced. This card can only be ritual summoned with the ritual spell card Dawn of the Herald. Okay, so this card, the advanced ritual art doesn't matter anymore.
Correct.
When your opponent activates a spell, trap card, or affect monster's effect, that is the weirdest line of text I've run on a Yu-Gi-Oh card. You can send one fairy type monster from your hand to the graveyard to negate the activation and destroy that card. From your hand
Dawn
to
of the
graveyard?
Herald.
Dawn of the Herald. This card is used to ritual summon Herald of Perfection. You must also tribute monsters from your hand or field whose total level equal exactly 6. When Herald of Perfection is ritual summoned by this card's effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard and then target one of the monsters in your graveyard that was tribute summoned for the ritual summon. Return that target to your hand. Okay, quick question for you. It says tribute monsters from your hand. That means you can't just tribute one monster that has level equals 6. It has to be more than one.
It could be it has to just equal exactly 6. So it could be 1 that is 6, or it could be 2 monsters that add up to 6, or, you know, so on.
When your opponent activates a spell, trap, or affect monster's effect, you can send 1 fairy type monster from your hand to the graveyard to negate the activation and destroy that card. And destroy, that means sent to the graveyard or banished?
Just sent to the graveyard.
Graveyard. Dude, what the fuck? This card's very interesting because it's the thing is this card's only as good as the fairy type monsters in your hand. Like, you need a pretty consistent effect if you want to keep stopping your opponent from doing something. So that it comes down to, is stopping one thing enough? I don't think so, because you have to spend 1 card, this card itself, and then potentially 2 other, maybe 1, to just get this on the board, and then you also have to have another one. But I guess you get 1 back because of just how Dawn of the Herald works. So I guess it really comes down to how many cards can you negate with this. And I guess the piece of the puzzle that I'm kind of missing is, like, how likely are you to have fairy type monsters in your hand? Because if you have 0, this card is fucking useless.
So I will give you some context to that.
Okay.
Some of the cards that search for the ritual monsters or spell cards, in fact, I will actually show you one of those just to be nice, are actually of the fairy typing, which does help this. I'm pretty sure that was probably intentional. Also, if you were going to play Herald of Perfection, there are enough good fairy type monsters to make a, like, fairy centralized deck to have this be a build around type card. I'll show you this just for some context here.
This card is normal at flip summon. You add 1 ritual monster, a ritual spell from your deck to your hand. Okay. Damn, that guy also looks pretty sick. Wow, that's a fairy?
Don't ask. Don't ask. Don't ask.
Okay, wow, so is this still before the era where hand traps exist?
This is still, yes, there is literally 1 hand trap that exists at this point, but it's very niche. All it does is you target a card in your opponent's graveyard and banish it. That's all it does. It's still a decent card, but it was not being played in every single deck at this point. Yeah,
it's interesting because if there's no other hand traps, this card value kind of goes up a little bit, just because the fact that you can negate a lot of stuff is very relevant towards your opponent's game plan. But I just don't know how consistently you can stop more than, like, 1 or 2 things. You definitely could stop 1. I'm assuming if you use 2 monsters, you could definitely summon you could stop 2, then that seems okay. Actually, no, you'll get 1 back. So then you'd have to have another one in your hand. And so, like, you're going, like, equal in card value. And then I guess you have this on the board. Oh, this is tough. I do think the, like, negation at this point is probably premium. Like, if it seems like it's an effect that's very far and few between at this point.
I will say, I do not think at this point there has been many Omni Negate cards that have been printed into the game. This card was printed in 2010, and so this type of effect, which might be more commonplace now in Yu-Gi-Oh, this has rarely been seen up until this point.
Okay, so once again, is he baiting me or is he not? I think at this point, this card's effect is very, because, like, the more years that pass in Yu-Gi-Oh, the stronger effects become. And having something like this that just ubiquitously, like, stops any card your opponent wants to do, it seems very, very good. If I'm giving up a fairy monster at that point, I'm very happy to stop something that stops my opponent from winning the game. Is there any fairy monsters? I don't know if this is allowed, but is there any fairy monsters that have an additional effect if they are discarded from your hand like this?
I would say no.
So there's no additional benefit for just tossing a fairy monster from your hand to the graveyard to stop something. It's just like you're stopping the effect.
Correct. I mean, putting it in the graveyard could be advantageous because then maybe you could, like, cheat it out potentially without having to normal summon it. So, like, there's that, but that's, like, with any card. So that's not, like, specific to this card.
Oh my God. I feel like I'm just saying they're all good because they all seem good. Like, it's weird that they're not. Okay, like, let me go. Am I in Disney World right now? Is this actually too much? Is this good enough for me to want to play, go through all the hoops to stop my opponent from playing the game? I mean, if I've learned anything from Yu-Gi-Oh, stopping your opponent from playing the game is pretty good.
You're learning.
So I'm gonna have to go with this is probably pretty good. I don't know about banned. Maybe it's banned. Maybe it just really stops your opponent from playing the game. Like, maybe it's probably unbanned if it was banned at this point or, like, earlier on. But hold on, I'm just trying
I can see that argument. I can see that argument.
Okay, don't. Now he's speaking words and it's changing my mind again. No, I'm gonna go with my gut. I'm gonna say it was banned. I can see it being unbanned, like, at this point in time, but I think, like, maybe an effect like this is very, very good. And if it ended up being the best thing, it's probably not the best thing for Yu-Gi-Oh. So I can see it being banned. So I'll go with it was banned as well.
So Herald of Perfection is, a lot of people love this card. Like I said, ritual monsters, they had printed other ritual monsters, up until this point, but the effects on those cards, it wasn't since Demise that people had been excited about a ritual monster. And Herald, like I said, having this effect that it's an Omni negate, it's also not a once per turn negate. So if you have infinite fairy fodder, hypothetically, you can negate as many things as you want. It's also not once per chain. So if your opponent does something, you could if they do something, you negate it, and they try to do something to stop your Herald, you can chain it again to negate the other thing, too, assuming you have the fairies to discard. So this was a very fun card for people to sort of brew with and build around to try to figure out how they can abuse this. There's another card I will show you that is part of the fairy archetype called Archlord Christia. Why don't you go ahead and give this card a read real quick?
You have exactly 4 fairy monsters in your graveyard. You get special summon this card from your hand. If summoned this way, target 1 fairy monster in your graveyard and add that target to your hand. Neither player gets special summon monsters. If this face-up card would be sent from the field to the graveyard, place on top of your deck instead. Yeah, okay. Yeah, continue.
So what people tried to do was they tried to put these 2 cards together in tandem. Ideally, if you could set up like a turn 1 board where you summon Herald of Perfection in defense position because it has 2,800 defense, it's actually, it has a huge butt, and that is relevant because not many things can hit over 2,800 at this point very consistently, especially when you could just negate them if they're going to threaten it. So if you could get Herald of Perfection out plus special summon Archlord Christia, if you have a way to get enough fairies in the graveyard to bring this out, it was game over because they can't special summon, which is going to be the way they try to out any of this. And then if there's anything threatening Christia, you can just negate it with Herald, and then it's just GG. Like, this was like the god combo for this deck. But it was never banned. It was not good enough. At this time, this card was released, I believe, in the Shining Darkness. There was like another FTK deck during the time that was way more powerful and way more consistent that people were toying around with. Not to mention, there were just... It was a bit of a pipe dream. This was a bit of a Disneyland deck if you could resolve it. It's fun. Like, it's cool when it went off, but it wasn't enough most of the time. I think the biggest issue, you actually pointed out right in the beginning, is having enough fairies to keep fueling Herald of Perfection. And at this point, there were enough fairies to make this card playable, but it was difficult to maintain over a long period of time. So if your opponent could sort of prolong the game or put enough resources to pressure the Herald so that they didn't have negations, your whole strategy would just fall apart, and that was basically just the end of your deck, because your deck has no other like backup win condition aside from Christia. And Christia is a beast. Christia is an insane card. I think Christia actually served time on the ban, not banned, but I think it was like either limited or semi-limited at one point because it's a really good card. But Herald just not good enough. Even you put an Omni negation on a ritual monster, and it's still not good enough.
Okay. Now I'm starting to believe that none of these are bans.
It's possible. It's possible.
Okay. I'm locked in.
Let's show you your next card.
Okay, what's that? How do you even pronounce that? Oh, what is this thing? All right, I'm gonna try my best here.
Go for it.
God,
I believe in you.
Hold on. Gishki? It's like Gishki.
Gishki.
Okay. You're gonna give me a million tries. I don't think I would have got it. Gus Kraken.
It's a Kraken.
I mean, I think it's just the photo you grabbed. The holographic background makes my eyes bleed, but I don't think it actually looks like this in real life. I hope not, at least. You can ritual summon this card with any Gishki ritual spell card. When this card is ritual summoned, look at up to 2 random cards in your opponent's hand, then shuffle one of them into the deck. Okay.
I will show you a Gishki ritual spell.
So we could use Ritual Art for this one.
Doesn't say you can't.
So this card can be used to ritual summon any Gishki ritual monster. You must also tribute monsters from the field or your hand whose total level is equal to the level of the ritual monster you summon. You must also you could shuffle this card from the graveyard into the deck to target 1 Gishki ritual monster in your graveyard, return that target to your hand.
So one of the things that they started doing, and you saw this with Dawn of the Herald, is that when they were printing ritual cards, they wanted to try to find ways to give people back some of the investment into summoning some of these cards. And so you can see here with Aquamirror, this was kind of the thing. Not only were you able to get a Gishki monster back to your hand, in this case, the card I'm showing you, but also the ritual spell itself shuffled itself back into the deck, allowing you to have access to more copies of it, to be able to be searched with a card like Manju, for instance.
You can shuffle this card from the graveyard into the deck to target one Gishki or Sure monster in your graveyard from the target to your hand. So not only does this go back into your deck, but then you get another card back in your hand that was in your graveyard?
Correct. So let's say you had another copy of Gustkraken in the graveyard. You could shuffle the Aquamirror back into the deck to get that second copy back to your hand.
Basically, at this point in time, they've realized that one of the biggest issues is just the resources were not worth the payoff. So they're trying to mitigate that problem. Now, is this card actually good enough to mitigate that problem? When this is ritual summoned, look up to 2 random cards in your opponent's hand and shuffle one of them into the deck. Okay, so the problem with this is if your opponent has no cards in their hand, this is awful. If they have 2 cards, you get full knowledge of what is in their hand, you send one back. If they have 3, it's still good enough. 4 is fine, you get to see half their hand, and then you get to send one back, which is good. 5 is still fine. Okay, so hand knowledge here is probably really important. You have said to me multiple times, looking at your hand, your opponent's hand is one of the most powerful things you can do in the game.
Correct.
Now, you also get, well, you only get to see 2, but you also get to send one of them back. And that could be actually very, very good because you could just completely break someone's combo. Or like whatever they wanted to do to counter you. Now, is this, like, when this says that when this card is ritual summon, does your opponent get to respond? It says look up 2 random cards in your opponent's hand. Like, is there anything your opponent can do to stop this?
They could, yes. We are still at the point in Yu-Gi-Oh! Though where there are no, like, widely played hand traps. If there are, there's, like, 1.
And this is the first time where I don't feel like we're truly in Disneyland to get this on the board. This seems like a more reasonable approach. Now, the question ends up being, is like the negate effect stronger than getting rid of what, not getting rid of, but like shuffling a card back into your opponent's deck and getting knowledge of another card in their hand? That seems good. Doesn't seem like a very unlikely thing to get on board either. What's this card called? Ritual Art again. May also send normal monsters from the deck to the graveyard whose total level is equal to the level of average monster. Okay, so if I needed that for redundancy reasons, it's also fine. I feel like if you showed me this first, I wouldn't think it would be that good. But now that I have more context, I feel like this is maybe slightly better. Also, I guess you've told me multiple times before, like I've said, that like looking at your opponent's hand is very strong.
You act like I don't put thought into these videos in the order that I don't.
It's not that. It's just this one's very difficult because of, like, again, I've never really seen any of these, and it's weird that like the ones I thought that would be playable in early Yu-Gi-Oh were not. So now we're in like this weird position. I'm in this weird, but you're fucking sitting there smirking, laughing. But I'm in this weird position where it's like, is this effect actually good enough? Like, you show me spells, right? I gotta forget what it's called. You showed me last video, I believe, where it's like, you get to look at your opponent's hand and send one back, and that card was banned. I forget what that one was called.
Trap Dust Shoot.
That card was very good, and this is almost the same thing. You just gotta jump through a little bit more hoops. So maybe we're not in Disneyland. We're like in the line. Like we're almost walking into the park, but like this is a little bit more reasonable to like see it happen before we actually enter the park. So at this point,
Trap Dust Shoot was banned before this card was printed.
Oh,
Trap Dust Shoot has been banned for a year now.
So
prior to this card being printed.
Let me. In Hearthstone, has there ever been a card that they printed, they had to nerf, and then they reprinted it again? See if they could do the same effect, but not as egregious. I can't think of any of them off the top of my head. Well, nowadays it's a little different, but that's years ahead of its time. This is still like early on in Yu-Gi-Oh, right?
This is like middle era. Like we're like 2011, 2012, 2013-ish, around there. So like midway through.
Man, it took them that long to put hand traps. I feel like from all these videos I've done, I feel like they've been a part of it for so much longer. Interesting.
It took them quite some. Hand traps didn't really become what you know them as until 2016, I want to say. That's like when the hand trap craze really started.
Is this hand trap playable? I'm like, go show me hand traps I've never seen before. Because I know Max C and like Ash, but other than that, I don't know any of them.
Max C is legal at this point.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
But is it really that good? Like, Max C feels like it's a card that like needed kind of like a critical mass for it to be like uber strong.
I will say historically, Max C was not considered very good. It took a while for Max C for people to realize how crazy of a card it was. But the game was also different before as well.
Okay, well, back to the Kraken. I'm gonna go with this card was very good. Okay. And I could see it being bad. I think the only reason I'm really being pushed for this though is because of previous cards that you've shown me where like they're like they don't like this effect and like this is still probably good enough to get banned. Okay, Go for it. What is it? Is it banned?
Let's talk about Gust Kraken.
Okay,
So it's funny when I do these videos with you because hearing your direction for like evaluating this card from like a Yu-Gi-Oh player perspective is so funny because I feel like from a Yu-Gi-Oh player perspective, as soon as we read a card, our brain defaults to what the worst case scenario is with this. And so with Gust Kraken, let me present the scenario to you where you ritual summon a Gust Kraken, and then you ritual summon another Gust Kraken, and then you ritual summon another Gust Kraken, and then you have a way to get the Gust Kraken back into your hand to ritual summon it a fourth time. So hypothetically, it was not out of the realm of possibility that you could just continuously summon Gust Kraken or multiple Gust Krakens to rip your opponent's entire hand out on the very first turn. So this is known as the Gust Kraken hand loop, and was a very, very degenerate strategy that people realized that they were able to do because by summoning multiple Gust Krakens, there was another card that was part of the combo that allowed you to essentially get the Gust Kraken to the graveyard and then sort of, you could just re-add it to your hand with the Gishki Aqua Mirrors effect. So then you could ritual summon it again as long as you had ways to continuously get access to the ability to ritual summon it. And the Gishki archetype specifically is a ritual-focused archetype. So I showed you that Manju card earlier. Gishki has its own versions of Manju, so you could have even more consistency for your ritual deck. They were really pushing for rituals to be good. And so the Gust Kraken hand loop was something that people were terrified of. It was something that was just feared and fabled, and it wasn't very good. The card was never banned. They actually did limit it because if you only have one copy of Gust Kraken, the loop was not sustainable in any way. And so as a result of that, limiting it to one sort of just nibbed the problem in the bud, and that was the end of the Gust Kraken hand loop.
Okay. So I'm gonna counter what you said at the start of your tangent there, where it was like,
sure.
When you go see this card, they look at the worst possibility of this. My problem is, as a Hearthstone player, is I don't know the sea of cards that are available for a card like this. A lot of moments in Yu-Gi-Oh where I think the critical mass is needed for a card to be just disgusting, and like you need to put that like puzzle together. I feel like Hearthstone often is never to that point where it's just like, oh, there's like this really disgusting thing that like is going to be built from this card. It happens, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, it is not like Yu-Gi-Oh, where like there's like infinite cards to think about. So my brain doesn't work like that. When I look at a Hearthstone card, for example, it's like, how much mana does this cost? Okay, does it impact the board immediately? Okay, it kind of does. All right, it might be playable. Like that's how my logic goes. It's not like, okay, so like here's this Yu-Gi-Oh card. Let me go look at every single card available to me. Hold on, I'm about to break the game. I can't. Unfortunately, I can't do that. I wish I could.
Speaking of potentially breaking the game, we have another Gishki monster to show you.
Okay, so far at this point, none of them have been banned. Oh God. Okay, I'm not gonna say Gishki. I'm just gonna call it that. Whoa, this one looks a little cooler. Okay, what is this?
Yeah, the art for this archetype is cool.
Mind August cannot be normal summoned or set. Must first be ritual summoned. You could ritual summon this card with any Gishki ritual spell card. When this card is ritual summoned, target up to 5 cards in any graveyard. Shuffle those targets to the deck. So that means if I pick cards from my opponent's graveyard, they go to my deck or their deck. I'm guessing theirs.
It goes into their respective deck. Yep.
Is that good? This is the least exciting one in my opinion.
Interesting. 5
cards in any graveyard. You can only do this on your side right? On your turn, sorry.
I believe at this point there is no way to conceivably ritual summon on your opponent's turn that I know of.
Okay, so like now why is this good? Hold on. Okay, what's the ritual card for this? Is the same thing as the Gishki?
It's the same one. It's the same one.
Okay, so hold on. Like,
why would I show you this, Rare? Why would I show you this?
That's what I'm wondering. Cause like it's so like I always say this in these videos, but like it's funny because in a vacuum, like I think I would say this card is just outright shit. Because we're doing this type of video where mind games is part of it. Like, why would you show me this? This is such a strange card, and it doesn't interact like in any way like the other ones do. Because the other ones are like a positive effect that does something on your opponent's board immediately. This one is just removed. I mean, that's still positive, I guess, sure. There has to be some kind of loop or something. Like, you just show me the Gishki Aqua Mirror, and I guess it's like the same concept where you just keep bouncing this back to your hand, and it's like an infinite loop. Is that like good enough? But it goes to your deck. Like, it doesn't even go to your hand. No, dude, is this trash? Like, what is this? When was this released? Like same time or like
same time? I think it was like it was not long or before or after the release of the other one. It might have even been at the same time, but I think it was the set before or after.
Hearthstone, we don't have a graveyard, But let's imagine a world where I can interact with my opponents like graveyard, because there is technically one, just not really the same way. I remove all the cards from the graveyard, or the cards I want from the graveyard. They can no longer use like the resummon effects and like Big Priest. I guess that's kind of sick. So like maybe I'd play that if the requirement for this card wasn't very good. Me personally, I guess I could counter fatigue. I can get a card back that I think is very good. But like this isn't Hearthstone where like tempo really matters as much as Yu-Gi-Oh, because Yu-Gi-Oh is just like do the most powerful thing possible and win the game from stopping your opponent from playing. So like maybe this is good because like you could stop your opponent. I think I'm like in Disneyland and I'm like fast passing it right now. I'm saying this card's bad. Like I think this is bad. There's no I can't. My Hearthstone brain does not allow me to see this card being good. So I can't just be like, psych, I think this card's amazing. I'm gonna go with this bad.
Final answer.
Final answer. This is the one that's banned, isn't it? 100%. Like, there's no fucking way. It's not. Go.
Many moons ago, Rarin, at YCS San Diego 2013, there was one player, one sick individual who came up with what is known as the Gishki FTK. And this is arguably one of the most disgusting first turn kill decks imaginable. How it worked, and I'm going to heavily summarize this because I could probably spend an entire video talking about this. In short, how this works is that the deck is designed to draw your entire deck, and essentially you actually correctly identified it. Mind August's ability to shuffle cards back into the deck means that you could theoretically infinitely loop it. In tandem with a lot of the other cards that were around at this time to support this archetype and just some other supplemental cards, theoretically you were able to draw your entire deck and you would always have the ability to put cards back into your deck to keep drawing. This, in tandem with a card called Hand Destruction. Hand Destruction is a card that reads both player draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. How this works is that since you theoretically have an infinite deck and your opponent doesn't, you can deck your opponent out. Now, the problem is, this is one of the slowest FTK decks to actually properly execute. Not to mention the amount of like mental gymnastics you have to do to make sure you play it properly. It is not out of the realm of possibility that the entire first game of a match in a best of 3 would take the entire time allotted in a tournament to finish resolving this FTK completely. The thing is, though, is that your opponent's drawing cards, and there are a couple hand traps around at this point. Max C is not good in this instance because you're just helping them deck yourself out at that point because you're special summoning basically infinitely. So there are a couple hand traps at this point that could technically be used to stop this loop. But if your opponent has to basically wait, am I going to wait and sit here for 30 minutes to see my whole deck and maybe potentially get the chance to stop them? It was one of the most toxic FTKs anyone had ever come up with. But they did not ban this card. You are correct. They ended up limiting it, which stopped the loop, because if there's only one copy of it, you can't shuffle another copy back into the deck to basically just keep going over and over and over again to go infinite. And that was the end of the Gishki FTK. It's a very funny part of Yu-Gi-Oh's history that this card was on the limited list at one point just to stop this stupid gimmicky deck, because people look back historically and there is a world where this could have been the best deck to be playing, but they stopped that from happening very quickly.
Because of how long it would take.
It's just the ultimate solitaire deck too. There wasn't, like I said, there's only like maybe 2 or 3 hand traps at this point that exist in the game. Some people did actually respect this enough to put a couple cards in their side deck to actually combat this. Some of the top pro players at the time did respect this to a degree, but thankfully it never caught on enough that it was going to become a problem, because this was just one of the most boring decks to ever play against. And I think they just didn't want this in the game ultimately.
Okay, no, that makes sense. That's probably for the best. Interesting.
but it's funny because, like you said, this card's terrible, but the fact that it enabled something so absurdly ridiculous is just funny to evaluate. So I was hoping you might think the mind games were going to get to you there.
I just can't, like, I don't know, you heard me. I just couldn't comprehend, like, why anyone would want to play this. Okay, interesting.
We're entering a new era of ritual monsters here. This is several years after the release of Mind August and Gust Kraken. We're in like 2015 at this point, and let's see what you think about this card.
All right, Nekroz sounds better. Of Bryanak.
Yeah, if you remember, I actually showed you the original Bryanak in a previous video.
You can ritual summon this card with any Nekroz ritual spell. Must be ritual summoned without using must be ritual summoned without using Nekroz or Bryanak, so it can't use itself.
Correct, because at this point, every other ritual monster could use itself for the condition. So if you had excess copies, like Herald of Perfection, for instance, you could use another Herald of Perfection to summon one because the levels were the same, so it was actually kind of perfect. But the Nekroz all have a restriction that prevented them from using themselves in that regard.
I guess they learned from the previous iterations of the Gishki monsters, right? Maybe that was the case, I'm not sure. You can only use each of these effects once per turn. You could discard this card, add 1 Nekroz monster from your deck to your hand, except this one. You could target up to 2 face-up monsters on the field that were special summoned from the extra deck, shuffle them into the deck. You can only use one of these effects once per turn, so you can pick between one of them. You can discard.
No, you can use both.
You can only, oh, my apologies. Sorry, you're so right. You can discard this card, add 1 Nekroz monster from your deck to your hand, except Nekroz. Okay.
So with this era of ritual monsters, I will give you a bit of context here. One of the ways that Konami sought to solve the ultimate problem with the ritual monsters was to provide them with even more consistency and ways to recur their resources. And so all of the Nekroz cards, or monsters specifically, have ways to get into other parts of the Nekroz archetype. And they are all ritual monsters or ritual spells. So this is like the ultimate consistency, the ultimate critical mass of ritual cards.
Do they still print ritual cards at this point in time?
They do. They do.
Interesting. I feel like at some point they would be like, okay, guys, we tried. Ritual monsters are not going to happen. Let's stop making it try to happen. But maybe this is the point where it actually starts becoming good, or like really good, I should say. Because like you're right. Like I guess now it does have a proactive effect, and you get the resource back, and it feels a lot better to probably play something like this. Because at this point in time, you said 2016.
This is 2015. 2015. I also forgot to show you your ritual spell. So there are 3 Nekroz ritual spells. I'm going to show you them. I have 3 Nekroz monsters and 3 Nekroz spells to show you. So I'm going to show you them one at a time.
This is the cycle. This card can be used to ritual summon any Nekroz ritual monster, any Nekroz ritual monster. Tribute monsters from your hand or field. When I read these cards on Discord, by the way, sometimes I just don't see the period just because of what the text is. So I read like a run-on sentence and then I'm like, wait, hold on. That doesn't make any sense. Tribute monsters from your hand or the field. The ritual summon 1 Nekroz ritual monster from your hand or graveyard whose level exactly equals to the total level of those monsters. You can only use this effect. You can tell this is like a future Yu-Gi-Oh card because now they're going ape shit with the wording here. This is crazy. You can only use this effect of Nekroz cycles once per turn. If you control no monsters, you could banish this card and add 1 Nekroz monster from your graveyard. Add 1 Nekroz spell from your deck to your hand. So it does both of those effects. Or both the effects. Yeah. So you can add a Nekroz monster to your graveyard and then add 1 from your deck. Okay, interesting.
So in short, you can use it to ritual summon a Nekroz. You can actually bring them back from the graveyard, which is the unique aspect of this. And then it has the secondary effect that if you have no monsters, you could banish this and a Nekroz monster from your graveyard to add any other Nekroz ritual spell from your deck to your hand. So the ritual spell.
No, go for it. I was gonna say this is like an actual like very consistent way of doing like cycles at this point. Like
correct.
So I can see like they're really trying to push this one. Like this is this one feels like they're really trying to make ritual summons work. Okay.
I will also give you a hint. All of the 3 Nekroz ritual spells that I will show you all have that last line of text where you can banish them and another Nekroz monster to add any of the other Nekroz ritual spells to hand. So it's not just exclusive to this one.
Sorry, I guess you can go on the next one if you're gonna show me. You're showing me more, right?
Yeah, if you want to see all of them now, I was gonna wait, but if you want me to show you,
do you want me to evaluate like this on its own?
Yeah, you can evaluate Bryanak on its own. If you'd like, I could show you all of them and you could talk about them all together. If that gives you better context, that's fine too.
I'm just curious why you're not showing them all at once. Is there a reason for it? Or do you just feel like it's just information overload?
Just information overload.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No,
but if you want the next one, I'll show it to you. If you want it, I'll show it to you. I have no issue.
Okay. Well, because the cycle seems like it's a fine card. So I guess the question comes back to Bryanak, right? Like the card seems fine.
Sure. So let me show you your next monster here. You can evaluate all of these together.
Oh my god. Unicorn. Okay. You could ritual summon this card with any. Okay. I'm assuming the first line of these is always going to be the exact same, right? Okay. You can discard this card to target 1 Nekroz card in your graveyard, except this one. Add it to your hand. You can only use this effect once per turn. Negate the effects of face-up monsters on the field that were special summoned from the extra deck. And sorry, is this a permanent thing?
Or that is a permanent thing while it's on the field.
Okay.
So here is your second Nekroz ritual spell. Give this one a read.
So wait, this is an aura, right? So like if they summon another monster from their extra deck, it also negates their effects?
It is a continuous effect, correct.
Okay. Kaleidoscope. Okay. This card can be used to ritual summon. I mean, this is the same line of text, right? Okay. Tribute one monster from your hand or field, or send one monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. Also, after that, ritual summon any number of Nekroz monsters whose total levels equals exactly the level of that monster. You can only use this effect of the Kaleidoscope once per turn. If you control no monsters, you could banish this card in one Nekroz monster. Okay, so it's the same line of text. So what I'm understanding here is they're giving you like consistency, but they also don't want you to loop it. So like it wants you to use all of these synergies together. So it feels like it's not like a continuous loop, because they probably learned from previous iterations of ritual monsters.
I will say, so how the Kaleidoscope was typically used is that basically, so let's take the Unicorn, for example. You could send a level 4 monster from your extra deck to the graveyard to pay the cost to summon the Nekroz of Unicorn through a ritual summon. So now you don't have to worry about having the resources on the field or in your hand. You can just use your extra deck as the cost, essentially, to bring these out to the field. Also, Kaleidoscope can summon multiple ritual monsters at once. So if you look at Unicorn plus Brionac, that their levels equal 10. If you send a level 10 monster from your extra deck to the graveyard, you could summon both Unicorn and Brionac at the same time.
Okay, we're actually kind of cooking here. Okay, hold on. What's after this? Hold on.
Let's see you read this one.
Okay. Okay, you can ritual summon this monster. Okay. Yeah, once per turn. Okay, without using, okay, it must be ritual summon without using any level 9 monsters. You can only use each of these effects once per turn. Okay. When a card or effect is activated that targets any of your Nekroz monsters, you can discard this card and negate the activation. So this is like a counter with a quick effect, okay?
It's like a hand trap specific to the archetype.
Yeah. Hold on. Is this has to be done on the board?
It's like, in your hand when you use that effect.
Wait, what the fuck? Hold on. Okay. When this card is ritual summoned, you can ban exactly 3 of your opponent's cards, 1 from each their hand, field, and graveyard. This card in hand is chosen at random. Okay. The card in hand is chosen at random. Okay. So that one seems pretty wait, so this card sits in your hand and you have a consistent way of getting it. So if your opponent wants to respond to what you're doing, you just say no. Okay. All right.
Here's your final okay. Ritual spell for the Nekroz.
Okay, so this is Mirror. You wanted me to evaluate these on their own? What the hell? This card could be used. I feel like I'm gonna call this right now. I'm gonna go through all of this. I'm gonna be like, wow, this actually looks really good comparatively to all the other ritual cards. And then you're gonna tell me, no, dude, this is the worst one actually. This card can be used to ritual summon. Okay, good. Tribute monsters from your hand or your battlefield are banished. Nekroz monsters from your graveyard. The ritual summon 1 Nekroz ritual monster from your hand whose level is exactly equals to the okay. You can only use this effect if Nekroz monster once per turn. If you control no monsters, you can banish this card. Okay, so it's basically the same thing, right?
So this one, the gimmick with this is that you could banish the monsters from your graveyard to pay for the cost. So the Kaleidoscope allows you to send them from the extra deck. The Mirror allows you to send them from, you could banish them from your graveyard, and then Cycle still has the typical clause where it has to be from the hand or field, but you're allowed to special summon a monster from the graveyard. You don't need to already have it in your hand like traditional ritual summon.
Okay, hold on. So now you're telling me I can pull resources out of anywhere. I have a counter
basically
in my hand. I also have a monster that completely negates any monster effects on the field. Is that only enemies? Let me reread that again. Okay, only face the monsters on the field that were special summoned from the extra deck. Okay, and let me go read the first one again. It's been like 8 years at this point. Discard this card for your monster to add a hand. Okay, you target up to 2 face of monsters on the field that were special summoned from the extra deck. Shuffle them into the deck. Like, I mean, like even that effect is pretty great. Like your opponent goes through the whole charade. You do this, and then they try to counter it, and then you play the 9-mana dude or the 9-mana guy, the Trishalite dude. And then that guy counters what they're trying to do, and then all of a sudden they're sitting there and crying. Okay,
I will also say there are more Nekroz monsters than this. I'm showing you the 6 most important cards that you need to be mindful of.
These ones by far are the ones that speak to me as they're actually good cards. Like a good combination of cards.
You said that about Relinquished, but okay, sure.
That's okay, but I meant Relinquished in like the early days of Yu-Gi-Oh seemed like a pretty good card. Like I still believe that after what you told me. But the fact that removal was better speaks why Relinquished I think was just a bad card. Because if you could just snap kill it, like if you could just use like a Shadow War Death after going all that charade like in Hearthstone, like it would be like, why am I even playing this? I completely understand that now. My opponent goes through their whole thing. They're like, okay, I can stop my opponent from doing something. but I can also bring 2 Trishalas in my hand, but it's only once per turn, right? Oh, this is a very interesting one because it's no longer about consistency at this point because it feels like these are very consistent. And resources don't feel like it's part of the equation anymore either. It's like, are these effects actually just good enough for you to want to play them?
You also are still allowed to play cards like Manju and such as well to help search these. So I would agree. I would say consistency is not the issue at this point.
So it's consistency is whatever. Resources at this point, it seems like it's very easy to get these cards. I don't know about very easy. Let's just say like it's very possible that you're going to get them. So it comes down to, is the effect of these cards actually worth running to make a like tier 1 deck that gets banned?
I will give you a hint. All of these cards were released in the same set.
Okay. Does that help me at all? Like,
I don't know.
Like, listen, bro, we've had Hearthstone archetypes that have all released in the same expansion. They suck ass.
That's true. That's true. I mean, you're noticing a trend here where they're trying to push the envelope with ritual cards. You said this is what's gotten you the most excited out of everything I've showed you. Was this good enough?
Yeah. So, but like once per turn, the thing that's really hyping me up is the negate. Like the fact that you can just drop that, and you said at this point, like there's not enough there's not a lot of hand traps.
At this point, this was a few years later from like the Gishki stuff. There is like effect Veiler to like potentially negate an effect. Max C is still in the format at this point. There are still like a few hand traps, but we've not gotten to the point where there's like a critical mass of hand traps like there is today. So there's a few ways your opponent could interact with this potentially.
Like I'm excited because it's consistent, but I don't know, man. Like, is this really that good? You would have to go Unicorn first and then play either you go Unicorn first into the Bryanak. The Unicorn stops monsters' effects, and then you need the Trishula in hand in case they have a spell that interacts with what you're doing. If I could consistently do that, potentially, I'm going to assume that is the correct order. That feels like that's good. Now, is that game winning? Because I could stop the effect once per turn. So I can play this on my opponent's turn as well, right?
At this point, I still don't believe you were able to ritual summon during the opponent's turn. So that is not a factor you need to consider.
Yeah, I was getting hyped up on some of these, but like the fact that the other ones were in ban at this point, like, is this really good? Like in 2015 Yu-Gi-Oh, like what were we saying in 2015 Yu-Gi-Oh? I mean, extra deck is playable at this point, obviously, if they're kind of targeting it. I'm gonna go with it. Oh my God, okay, it's probably playable. Is it bannable? I don't think so.
Do any of these like just on glance, like which of these look like they would be bannable? Like where are you at with that? Like, have you ruled any of them out?
See, it's tough because I don't think any individual piece really is bannable. Like, I think you're going. What do you mean interesting? What do you mean by that? What are you saying? Like,
I'm just listening. I'm just listening.
You see, okay, like I can go through one by one if that explains the thought process more, because this is obviously a lot of cards and I'm kind of just like blanketing all in one statement. If I look at Unicorn, the good thing about Unicorn is that if it's on board, I could definitely stop my opponent from playing their game if they're looking to do monsters effects.
Sure.
The one issue with this card is it does affect my side of the board. So I would have to build my deck in a particular way that doesn't really care about effects from the extra deck, which seems like that is what you're going for anyways, based on what you have shown me.
Correct. Ritual monsters are not played in the extra deck, so that
means not only are they making an archetype to push, or not only are they pushing ritual archetype, they're trying to suppress arguably the strongest thing at this point, I'm going to assume, which is the extra deck. So that seems like that's fine. Is it bannable? I don't think so. So then we move on to Bryanak. Bryanak is interesting because of the fact that you don't actually need to negate anything. You could just send 2 minions, some from the extra deck, back into the deck, and then your opponent doesn't have the resources potentially to do that again, which could seal the game in some matchups or like whatever the game state may happen to be. It's very contextual, but it's obviously very good. But again, like, is that bannable? Like, I don't think so. Like, you're just reacting to what your opponent did. That doesn't seem like that's that bannable. Then we go to Trishula. The only thing that's really like speaking to me, actually, you know what? Hold on a second. I can negate and I can do the ritual summon thing. You can do both, right? When this card effect is activated. Wait, so hold on a second. I can, just so I'm understanding this card properly, I can negate something and that puts it on the board.
No, that would discard it to the graveyard. So, but then you could use Nekroz Cycle to bring it back from the graveyard in that instance.
That does that put it on the board?
That would put it on the board.
Hold on, because then that's kind of spicy. Because then you can stop them, and then you play this, and then you bring it back to the board, and then you get rid of 3 cards: 1 for the hand, 1 for the field, and 1 for the graveyard. And I'm guessing you choose the one from the field in the graveyard.
You do. Well, you're picking the hand too, but it's random. So
Right. Oh my god. I think it's good. I don't think it's bannable. I'm not gonna say it's bannable. I don't see it. I don't believe it's bannable. I think it's just good.
What if I show you this card?
Oh god. There's more. What is this? The Djinn, releaser of rituals. When you ritual summon a monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard as one of the monsters required for that ritual summon. If a player ritual summons using this card, the other player cannot special summon while the ritual summon monster is face up on the field. And this is a resource you could use for this Trishula or Nekroz ritual summon. But what if they already have stuff on board?
That would stay, but going forward, they wouldn't be able to special summon.
Going first? I mean, that's pretty sick. That could be pretty nasty. Going second? I don't know about going second. This is good if you're ahead. If you're the proactive player, this is very powerful, obviously. No, I'm not falling for your lies. I don't think it's banned.
Okay. Final answer.
Final answer.
Let's give you some history about the Nekroz. So I've shown you a lot of rituals up until this point. 2015, this was probably the era where Konami decided, okay, we are going to put everything into the ritual archetype that is going to define the ages. And that is ultimately what the Nekroz archetype became. There's a couple other Nekroz that I didn't show you, but for the most part, they're just more like supporting cast. Brionac, like it says, you can discard it to add a Nekroz monster. There was one that could also discard to add any of the Nekroz ritual spells. So you very easily identified, just from me showing you all these cards, there was no issue with consistency with this deck. This, like, debatably, especially for the time, is probably considered one of the most consistent decks, like not even just by ritual standards, but like of all time. Just because every card searched basically every other card in the deck, either directly or through some other card, which was really cool because obviously as card game players, we like having as much agency as possible in being able to actually play our game and do our plays the way that we want to. The Nekroz archetype, to no one's surprise, absolutely dominated. This was the best deck ever since its release. It was a deck that people absolutely feared. Nekroz of Trishula specifically was the card that people feared most because its effect to banish 3 cards didn't target. It got around effects that were destruction protection or things that would send things to graveyard. Didn't matter because Trishula banished them. During this point in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, there were several strategies that like relied on the graveyard. So not only could you banish like the best card they have on the field that doesn't get a graveyard effect, but it also could banish stuff out of the graveyard that has any sort of effect to like recur later. Trishula was the card that defined the format and was an absolute powerhouse, but it obviously had its supporting cast. Unicorn was fantastic because during this time, like you mentioned, a lot of decks were special summon extra deck reliant. And so Unicorn essentially being a skill drain for that, when your deck doesn't care because your deck is all ritual cards, they basically needed to print cards like this to give the ritual deck an edge to compete against some of the other top decks at the time. And Brionac's funny, it's best application was actually just for adding whatever Nekroz monster you needed at any moment. The second effect to bounce stuff was relevant, but people were primarily using Brionac just to get any of the other cards in their hand. The fact that it had all this other upside being a ritual monster and had this other effect if you needed it was good utility, but for the most part, people were just using it as more copies to tutor out other things that they needed at any given point. So there was already tons of consistency for this deck. The cards were incredibly pushed. One of the best decks of all time, arguably. By nowadays standards, this deck couldn't compete. It has received support, and anytime this deck receives support, people always try to find a way to break this deck because this deck is actually beloved by a lot of players. Pro players especially really loved it because the mirror matches were very skillful, and people actually had a lot of fun with this deck. There were however, some abusable cards, such as the one I showed you, the Djinn Releaser of Rituals, which made it so that if you go first and you use a Djinn as part of your ritual summon to summon any of the things, now all of a sudden your opponent just can't play the game whatsoever, and people had to play specific cards to prevent this from happening. And so that unfortunately was a shadow that loomed large over the Nekroz format, that people had to play this like mini game of like, oh, if I can't out Djinn, I just lose the game automatically. But with Trishula, it's really funny because in the mirror match, people who would go first would do all these things to like set up their like hand and like their resources. And if you are able to set up a situation where you have no cards on your field, Nekroz of Trishula actually cannot activate its effect because it has to banish from all 3 zones in order to activate its effect. So you would see the opponent play for 2 or 3 minutes doing all these things, going through all these like sequences, and they would end with no board and just pass to the opponent, and they couldn't get trished. So it became this like mind game of like who's going to commit to the board first so that the other person can trish them. Very, very funny card. There's another Nekroz monster that also ended the battle phase immediately, which is why you were able to do that and not die on the crackback or anything. But with all that said, Nekroz of Brionac, Nekroz of Unicorn, Nekroz of Trishula were all never banned. They all, I don't want to say all of them, but several of these cards got limited for a long period of time. The biggest offender, actually, out of all these cards that I showed you was Djinn, Releaser of Rituals. That card got banned just because it created a very toxic play pattern of just locking your opponent out from playing altogether. So they banned the Djinn, but the Nekroz were free to just run rampant. Limiting a lot of their consistency definitely hurt the deck, and as the game progressed, it just kind of got power crept, unfortunately. But this was probably, even to this day, the strongest ritual deck that has ever been printed in Yu-Gi-Oh!
Damn. Yeah, I was gonna say to you, if you told me it counts as being banned because the Djinn got banned, I was about to ball.
No,
no way, man.
But you said Djinn wasn't banned either, so you lose a point for that. You lose a point for that. All right, last one. This is one of the most modern printed.
You just said this is like the strongest one ever made, and then you're showing me one more. What the fuck is this? Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon. Okay, so like we're in Konami office, and they're like, guys, we need to get people more excited about Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's put another Blue Eyes, and then this is what they came up with. What the?
You know they're not going to disappoint with this one, right?
Surely. You can ritual summon this card with chaos form. Must be ritual summoned and cannot be special summoned by other ways. Cannot be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So that's like trap, spell, monsters, anything.
Anything that targets, anything that destroys. Yep.
This card
it can be killed in battle. This
card attacks a defense position monster, inflict double piercing battle damage to your opponent. Oh, that actually seems like it's pretty dog shit depending on when this is released. Hold on. This card can be used to ritual summon any chaos or blackluster soldier ritual monster. You must also tribute monsters from your hand or field, or banish Blue Eyes White Dragon or Dark Magician from your graveyard. Exactly equal the ritual of the level. Okay, so basically the same line of text, but just for the specific one. It's also really interesting that they're leaning into like the nostalgia factor here, right? Blue Eyes and Dark Magician.
Well, this one was from the movie, the most recent Yu-Gi-Oh movie that got released a few years ago. This was Kaiba's new, upgrade to the Blue Eyes White Dragon.
Wait, this is like an animated film, right? Am I going to spoil this for me if I Google search it and see what it looks like in the anime, or you want me to do that?
It looks like what you see in front of you.
Okay,
it honestly looks exactly the same.
He looks pretty sick. I'm not going to lie to you.
It is a very cool looking card. It's a very sick looking card.
Like, I don't know what Kaiba's doing to these dragons for them to follow, but like this guy's pretty sick. I mean, okay, cannot be targeted, destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Sure, that's pretty sick. So
also look at the attack on this. You might have
4,000 is pretty fire. When was this released? This seems like it's a pretty recent card. So post 2020.
This was released in 2016, not long after the reign of Nekroz. Yes. So I want to say at this point, Nekroz has been hit to the point where it is unplayable, or people are still coping thinking it is playable.
Okay, so just so I am clear, if I do the Trishula effect of like banish exactly 3 of your opponent's cards, and Blue Eyes is the only one on the board, it will not die because of its line of text. It can't be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects.
Let me quickly check here. So Trishula does not target.
So if it's just like blanket sentence, then, but it says it cannot be destroyed, right? So I wonder if that also accounts for this, but I'm not sure.
It does not. Trishula banishes, so that plays around targeting protection, and it plays around destruction protection, which is one of the reasons why. Sorry,
is Baron in the game at this point?
No, Baron is years later.
Okay. I was gonna be like, no way, this card saw any play if Baron's alive.
That's why Trishula was so powerful, though. The fact it didn't target or didn't destroy was an effect like that plays around so many different types of protection is very rare in Yu-Gi-Oh! I want to say.
I get you. Okay. So it comes down to, I don't know if chaos form really matters in this case. I guess like it's kind of cool that you use Blue Eyes White Dragon, Dark Magician.
Yeah, the whole thing, I can give you this. The whole thing with Chaos Form is that you're playing this in Blue Eyes in some capacity. The whole idea is that you could just banish a Blue Eyes from the graveyard. So it's like you get to play this for free, right? You don't need to, like, you can send the Blue Eyes to the graveyard with, like, advanced ritual art or something and just bring this out, you know?
Okay, so that makes me wonder, is Blue Eyes White Dragon ever, like, a competitive card? Because maybe, like, even, like, the older days of Yu-Gi-Oh!, I don't even think it was. Like, it was just kind of, like, it was the guy, right?
I'll give you context, especially around the time the release of this movie, they printed several support cards for Blue Eyes that require you to play the original Blue Eyes White Dragon in the deck, but the cards themselves are actually quite good, and this is one of them. So the trade-off is you have to play this objectively bad card, but you're trading that for what you could possibly get in exchange for playing that bad card, if you will.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, because I was gonna say, like, if they're asking you to play Blue Eyes White Dragon or Dark Magician, like, they would have to allow it to be competitive in, like, the current day.
Correct. Correct. And so this support was made, 15 years later. So they're designing it with that in mind. Not to mention with the release of the movie, you could argue that these cards could be pushed to an extent.
Okay, so I'm gonna take a different approach here. Okay.
Okay. Sure.
I don't know if you play League of Legends. I don't even know if you've
never have.
Okay, so
I played Runeterra like twice and never played League, which is kind of funny.
Did you ever watch Arcane? Did you ever watch?
No.
Okay, so this is why I'm gonna explain this really carefully, or very well here, so you understand where I'm coming from. Arcane revolves around characters in League of Legends that you can play. Jinx, Vi, Victor, Jace. There's a couple other ones, but those are the main four I'm going to talk about in this case. All of those characters throughout League of Legends history have been playable. You could imagine when Riot was, releasing Arcane, which ended up being a very, very, very big success for them. People would come over after watching Arcane and be like, oh, I want to play League of Legends and I want to play somebody from Arcane. So Riot buffed all of these characters to make sure that they were playable and they were good so people could play their favorite character from Arcane. I am guessing that Konami would follow the exact same philosophy when it came to their favorite dragon, Blue Eyes. I'm not sure about Dark Magician, but maybe it was also in the same realm. If it was also on Chaos Form, maybe they printed a brand new thing. So I would hope for Konami's sake, especially because it's a movie and there's a lot of production that probably went into a lot of money, they would want these cards to be playable because people love Blue Eyes. And in an era where like maybe Yu-Gi-Oh wasn't being like as popular, this was a great way to get people back into the game so they can relive their childhood. That being said, I don't know if this card was that good. I'm not gonna say it was banned. I don't think it's very good.
Final answer.
Final answer.
So Chaos Max Dragon is a menace, especially at the time when it was released.
Really?
There are,
Okay.
and even after it was released, there are several archetypes that would have effects that would either target or destroy, and Chaos Max had immunity to that. Funny enough, it also happened to be that some of those archetypes had monsters that had 0 defense points, which meant that if Chaos Max connected, 4,000 times 2 is 8,000 piercing, which means you automatically kill your opponent, and that's just GG right there.
Right.
So as a result of that, Chaos Max was actually playable in some capacity, and that actually surprised a lot of people. But yeah, you're right. It's bad. It's I don't want to say it's bad. I don't want to say it's bad. This card actually, there are times where if you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh nowadays, if you are confronted with a Chaos Max, there is a non-zero chance that you may not have an out to this card. That is like
That's
how
fair.
good it is because
That's fair.
it's giant. It has a lot of protection. The double piercing's kind of whatever. It's a way to just end the game because if you don't have an out, you're just going to like set things to protect yourself. You're just going to get like double pierced. You just die. But especially by modern standards, even at the time this was released, there was enough cards or like, Trishula type effects, right, that would allow you to have ways to deal with Chaos Max hitting the board. And I think that's like really the thing that hindered it from being this like insane card. It's a Timmy card. It's a card that like everyone watching the movie was like, whoa, Chaos Max Dragon,
Yeah.
this is crazy. And then they play it and maybe they get to cheese a win on the playground with their friends, or like you go to a locals and maybe you beat like one person out of 5 with it because they don't have an out to it. Typically when you go into like the side deck 2 games 2 and 3, you're almost guaranteed going to have an out to this card because there were other cards in that time that had similar protection effects. So people were already sideboarding cards to beat this card. So it was kind of just like incidentally, there were people already playing ways to deal with it. It was a rogue strategy at best. It sometimes would top a regional here and there. That was like the most success this deck ever had. Really cool card, cool throwback to the anime, but not banned. So you may have noticed that throughout this entire video, every ritual card I've showed you has never been banned. So that is a testament to how bad these cards have been
they
historically.
still print them, like you said, to this day. So the one that they print most recently is still not playable.
There is I don't want to say not playable. There was a ritual deck a couple years ago. I think it was actually during COVID that called the Megaliths. They were actually a really cool ritual archetype. They had the ability to ritual summon the opponent's turn, which is also kind of cool. That deck was really good. So there have been like some like instances where the ritual archetypes saw play, but were they the best thing you could be doing? Nekroz was probably the only example of Nekroz was by far and away the best deck in any given format. But they handcrafted it to be that at the end of the day. There is actually in the new set at the time of recording this video that's coming out in Japan right now, I want to say, there's a ritual monster in it. And I don't know at this point if that deck's going to be playable. It looks like the worst deck of the three, to be honest. But yeah, it's ritual monsters just historically have just... They're just not there. They're just not there. There's too many issues with them fundamentally, especially when you have the extra deck that you could just pull all these resources out of. Why would you jump through all these hoops when it's just... the payoff just has never been there.
That sucks. Blue Eyes Chaos Mass Dragon, bro.
Oh, but you get scarred if you get killed by this card because you're like, I can't believe I just lost to a fucking anime card.
I honestly, I think it would be the reverse for me. I'd be like, damn, you actually won a game with that? That's pretty sick.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, that too.
Because you would never see it. I'd rather lose to something that's not popular and like completely takes me by surprise than like the meta thing. Like that's always the case with like card games for me because losing sucks regardless, right? No one's happy when they lose. If I'm losing in a cool way, I'm like, okay, like I'll get over it.
So who knows? Maybe in the future, few years from now, maybe they'll release some crazy ritual monster that they would literally have to just make it some just bullshit card that like either wins the game automatically or just like prevents your opponent from doing anything. And then it would be playable and then it would probably get banned. So maybe, you know, historically speaking, one of these cards will be on this list at some point. But yep, at best, a lot of these cards were limited. And that's the history of ritual monsters for Yu-Gi-Oh! So what do you think?
Unfortunate. I'm so sorry, Konami. Maybe try a little bit better next time.
Get good.
Sounds like a skill diff, I'm gonna be honest. How have they not done it in 15 years?
23! 23 years.
Well, okay, that's actually crazy though. I feel bad for Yu-Gi-Oh players, especially if this is like because this is what they did in like the Yu-Gi-Oh show, right? They were,
yeah,
like,
ritual summoning was in like the first few episodes, not the first few episodes, the first season of the anime. They ritual summoned multiple times.
That sucks. That actually sucks.
So guys, that's going to wrap it up for another video. I really hope you all enjoyed. Let's go ahead and shout the patrons for all of their continued support. So shoutouts to Shout1317, Sim00x3, MBT Play Medolce, Moto, Cameron L. Smith, The Synchro Guy, Pony Stark, Dan the Man Hoban, Little Fadeleaf, Draconic, Dylan Rare Hunter, JW11860, Brian Dancer of Class 7, Flannel Daddy, Twinkle Muncher, literally all of the guinea pigs, Cheeks McLapperty, Stolfin Amethyst, Wonder Waffle, MBT Cancel by Community soon, Cancel by all Committee soon, Cancel by all Players soon, Corvain, Absolute Angriest Peacock of the Edison Club, Daniel Howell, and life keeps using solemn judgment on my hopes and dreams. Thank you all so much again for watching, and we will see you next time.